You know, I have lived near the forest for many years, and this forest has become a real friend to me. Every tree, every path is familiar, and it seems that I know every bird that sings in the morning and every animal that runs by. The forest is not just a place where trees grow, it is a whole world. I often walk there even when the weather is not very friendly. All these trees, how many times have I sat under the oaks, listening to how they creak softly in the wind? Oaks are real old-timers of the forest. They can live hundreds of years, and their trunks are so thick that even two people cannot hug them. And their bark is difficult to damage because it is so rough. These are giant trees, real guardians of the forest. But birches, they are completely different. Thin with white bark that looks almost as if it has been peeled. Their leaves sway in the wind, and it is so peaceful to listen to them, as if someone is whispering in your ear. I even used to collect birch sap when spring was just coming. I remember how sweet it was. And birches remind me of my childhood, when my friends and I would run through the forest and hide under their snow-white trunks. Pine trees are a different story. They are always green, even in winter when everything around is covered in snow. Pine trees are tall, and I always feel like they are looking at me with their powerful branches, like wise old mentors. And you know, when winter comes, pine trees look so wonderful. They are like Christmas trees, only without decorations. The wind blows, the snow quietly settles on their branches. It's like magic. But you know that the forest is not only about trees, it is full of life. Every time I walk through the forest, I hear different sounds. Foxes are very careful. They are always hidden in thick bushes and do not like to show themselves. And the hares, how fast they run. Just one look and they're already gone in the forest. They usually jump to hide in the tall grass and try to be invisible. And there are also squirrels that live in the trees. They are so mischievous, always with their tails that catch your eye, and they jump from tree to tree. But most of all, I love listening to how the forest comes to life at night. Then I go outside and hear an owl hooting. Sometimes it seems like they know more than we do. And this silence, when all the sounds disappear, and only their eyes shine in the darkness, like little lights, it's just a miracle that you have to see to understand. What's interesting is that the forest is always changing. I notice how its face changes at different times of the year. In winter it is quiet, as if sleeping. In summer it turns green and is filled with birds. In spring everything comes to life. And in autumn the forest changes colors, like an artist painting his paintings. And even if winter has come, I still know that the forest does not die. It simply rests and then wakes up again, and this miracle begins again. And you know, I will tell you one thing. The forest is not just a place. It is a friend who is always there. And I thank him for the fact that he has always been and will always be here, changing himself, but remaining faithful and unchanging.
Forest steppes are a real natural oasis where the features of forest and steppe are intertwined. This is a place where you can see an amazing combination of spacious open plains, overgrown with green grass and flowers, and quiet but dense forest areas covered with old trees. Imagine yourself walking through this area. On one side, the soft grass cover of the steppe, and on the other, shady forests, where the treetops touch, creating the effect of a natural support for the sky. Various trees grow in such forests. Oaks and ash trees, which can reach enormous sizes, create a majestic atmosphere of antiquity. Birches with their white trunks and light green leaves look very elegant, while willows can often be found near water, creating ideal conditions for insects and birds. It is here in such forests that many animals live, and one of the most characteristic is the roe deer. Roe deer are extremely beautiful and agile animals. Their sparkling eyes reflect the surrounding nature, and their fur and manner of movement are so elegant that sometimes it seems that you are watching invisible, mythical creatures. They live in forest steppes, often hiding among bushes or in dark forests to avoid predators. Their genus is very cautious, and even one sound or slight movement can make a roe deer break out into speed, trying to escape into the depths of the forest. They actively graze on the grassy expanses of the steppe, and in the forest they find shelter from the heat and predators. Another important component of the forest steppes is water. Here you will find many streams and rivers that flow through the entire area. The water in them is clean and cool, and the banks are covered with a variety of plants, from tall grasses to blooming wildflowers. Forest rivers often change their course, forming small lakes or swamps where fish and waterfowl find food. And the streams, which can so often be seen in the forests, always give a feeling of peace and quiet. Their noise creates a background for all the surrounding life. And you know there is another wonderful feeling when you walk in this area. Around you in the forest, you can hear the melodious singing of birds hiding in the trees, the quiet rustle of leaves underfoot, and even the sound of small pieces of bark falling from the trees when the wind slightly lifts them from the ground. In the forest steppes, there are many everyday trifles that make this world so alive and full. In such places, nature does not seek to show its power, as in the mountains, but it gives a person peace and a sense of unity with all living things. Here you do not feel the noise of a big city, but only the air that smells of freshness, herbs, and wood. Forest steppes are a place where you can find inner peace, feel like a part of nature, and simply enjoy its simplicity and beauty. And when you walk these trails, your soul is filled with lightness, and your heart beats in rhythm with the nature that surrounds you. Fallen trees in the wind. The forest often experienced storms when the wind tore trees up by the roots and turned them over to the ground. The fallen trees became part of the new ecosystem of the forest, hiding small shelters for animals, birds, and insects. They turned into huge green sculptures that decorated the forest paths. The foxes loved to wander among these trees, studying all their details, finding food there or watching for their opponents. The wind was one of the main characters in this magnificent scene. It was both friend and enemy at the same time. When it drove the clouds towards the forest, the trees bent, as if in a welcoming bow. The foxes felt this movement of air. Their fur rose, and even their tails began to tremble a little with excitement. They knew well that the wind could be a good friend when it brought coolness or spring smells, but sometimes it treated the forest and its inhabitants with cruelty. Fallen trees, branches flying through the forest. All this became a test for the foxes. The foxes more than once found themselves in unpleasant situations when they needed to quickly find shelter from the storm. They had their shelters under old trunks, in the roots of large trees, in the voids between fallen trees, where even a strong wind could not reach them. Part 4. The Wisdom of the Forest. Over the years, the foxes became wiser. They learned to understand when nature was ready for change, and when they needed to leave their usual places to avoid danger. The forest, with its various water flows, wind changes, and storms, was a constant teacher for them. Each new day brought new opportunities to study and understand the world around them. The foxes often watched the other animals that shared the forest with them. They saw deer crossing rivers and eagles circling in the sky. It was clear that all these creatures, although they had different paths, eventually returned to the same place, to the forest, which was home to everyone. The forest was a place where everyone was equal, where even storms and winds could not break the spirit of this place. All its inhabitants lived in harmony, dependent on each other, and the forest taught them that everything in nature has its role. Everyone has their place under the sun, and everyone, from the smallest insect to the majestic tree, has their own value in this great harmony. Deep in the forest. The forest, rarely visited by humans, was a place where everything was interconnected. Rivers and streams quietly sloshed between huge trees rooted in the very essence of the earth. The leaves on the trees whispered their stories, conveying the knowledge of generations that grew and disappeared here over the centuries. Not only nature lives here, but also its spirit. The forest and its inhabitants were one. Each element had its place, even the smallest ants or the tallest trees, which proudly stretched their roots deep, as if striving to touch the very essence of the world. In the midst of this unusual world, among bright colors and sounds, there was a small family of foxes. Their life was like the entire forest, filled with adventures, obstacles, and the joy of being. Foxes were not just inhabitants of the forest, but its integral part. Each of them had its place in this big world, where the winds turned and raged, where the rains came and went, leaving the earth moistened and the streams full of water. They were fast, like the wind, which sometimes broke out from under the crowns of the trees and did not allow the entire forest to breathe peacefully. The foxes always felt at home here. Therefore, when the sky began to cloud over the forest and the wind became stronger, they simply found shelter among the fallen trees or between the trunks of old trees that had long lost their branches, but were still strong and stable. Part 2. Rivers and Streams. The forest was not only a home for the foxes, but also a place where the currents of rivers and streams constantly intersected, overcoming various obstacles. The rivers here were not ordinary bodies of water. They were living beings with character and emotions. The flow of the river changed depending on how the wind blew, how much water the sky brought, and even how the animals moved along its banks. Foxes often found their favorite places on the banks of the stream, where the water was cool and clean